Honorable Philip J. Prime Minister of St. Lucia. Honorable Stevenson King, Senior Minister and Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Digital Development and Urban Renewal. Honorable Kenton Casimir, Parliamentary Representative for Josele. Honorable Dr. Pauline Antoine Prosper. Honorable Moses Musa Labakis, the Ministry of Health. Honorable Joachim Henry, Parliamentary Representative for Cassie Southeast. I corrected myself. Permanent Secretaries. Assistant Commissioner of Police. Acting Director of NEMO, Ms. Maria Mida. Other technical officials from the various ministries. Other specially invited guests. Media. St. Lucia, good morning. My name is Mondi Lewis, and I am the Press Secretary to the Prime Minister and your moderator for this morning. I would like to thank you for joining us to this update to the nation on the passing of the November 6th Trough and press briefing, because a lot of work has been done since November the 6th, and we thought it necessary to provide you with an assessment and also a way forward for the people, for the families, for the households who lost basically everything on Sunday, November 6th. To provide you with opening remarks, I would like to call on the Honorable Prime Minister, Philip J. Pierre.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Let me recognize the head table, the members of the cabinet. The very presence of so many cabinet ministers here today shows you the importance in which we are taking the issues that we are going to be discussing. Also recognize the acting director of NEMO, the permanent secretaries, Deputy Commissioner of Police, members of the police force, the officer in charge of WASCO, representative of the fire service. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I thought it necessary to call everyone here this morning so we can find out where we are and where we intend to go as far as the flooding that took place on Sunday. The news is that is going to happen again. The floods are going to be coming again, and they may be worse than what happened on Sunday. That is the reality that we face, and it's the reality we have to deal with. We are going to be getting more flooding. We are going to be getting worse weather, and the country will have to mitigate or try its best to mitigate against these natural problems and the issues that relate to these weather situations. It's unfortunate in that we are not the ones who caused it, but we are the ones who are suffering from it. The world body has promised us over $200 billion several years ago to help mitigate against these efforts. And up to now, up to this very moment, we've not collected a fraction of that $200 billion. So it's left to us with our tight fiscal situation to deal with the issues on hand. We have a challenge of how we will finance these mitigation efforts. We have to finance it at two levels. Level number one, we have to try to mitigate against the issues. That means we have to build retaining walls, we have to build structures that can deal with the floods, the hurricanes that will come. Then we have to adapt. We have to adapt to the situation when it arises. So why are we here this morning? First of all, I'd like to thank all the emergency personnel and the staff and people of NEMO for the work they've done so far. I visited NEMO last week, and it really is a labor of love. And I want to thank all the volunteers and all the people who went out there and worked tirelessly. These are the unsung heroes, the people who go out there without any fuss and get the work done. I want to really thank them for what they've done so far and tell them that the government appreciates what they are doing. And when the time comes, we will show our appreciation. I also want to thank the staff of WASCO and Lucilec, who have gone out there and done what they ought to do. And of course, members of the fire service and members of the police force. Everybody came together, and this is at the one time when St. Lucia gets together to deal with these issues. I want to thank everyone. The challenge is where do we go from here? We've not completed the assessments, but from what I've seen, in fact, on Sunday I was actually on the scene when it happened. But if you know me well, I'm camera shy, so I did not reveal on Facebook where I was. But I was actually there on Sunday, and I did a few things which shall remain unsaid. But I actually was involved on the Sunday issues. I was actually on the side, on the scene. And it was horrible. It was really, really horrible. It was sad to see how people lost everything literally in seconds. In seconds. In fact, in less than an hour, the destruction had happened and it was complete in less than an hour. And I want to tell you, it's going to get worse and it's going to happen again. Sad news, but factual news. That is going to happen again. What can we do to mitigate against these efforts? I also want to mention the students and the principal and teachers at the Dame Paulette Louise's primary school. That again was sad to see the entire school underwater, and the children literally lost, especially some classes, everything. I think the government will have to have a special fund for the Dame Paulette Louise School. And I see so we'll have to talk with the permanent secretary, see how we can do, what we can do, where we can get the money from for that school. What do we do? What is the way forward? The way forward is that we have to do the things that we can do ourselves. We have to stop dumping garbage in the rivers. We have to stop dumping garbage in the rivers. In those rivers, there were things that could never get there if somebody did not throw them. Fridges, stoves, garbage. It's very easy for us to stop doing that. Bush, old trees, old appliances. When we dispose of these things in the rivers, it'll come to haunt us. And it came to haunt us. I want to make a plea to the public of St. Lucia. Please stop disposing garbage in the rivers and waterways of the country. Please. If everyone cleans the drain in front of their home, we will mitigate against that flooding. There's a tendency now where we want contracts to clean in front of our house. In the final analysis, all of us will suffer. All of us will suffer. As Bob Marley says, when the rain comes down, it doesn't come on one man's house. All of us will suffer. So each of us individually must see if we can do something to mitigate against these problems. And as I've said before, it will happen again. Climate change is real. Climate change is real. So we are here today. We are going to be here at some time again to deal with a weather event. That is reality. What is the government doing? We have applied for a loan from the Caribbean Development Bank of $5 million US, which we hope we will get. And there is also a grant of 300,000 US. The grant, we have to apply for that grant. There were some issues, whether it was a level 1 or level 2. I think these issues have been rectified. So we should be able to get these funds in as soon as possible. But again, we have to deal with the bureaucracy of the bank and all the documents and all that. And I always say, and I make no bones about it, why is you getting all that paperwork done? People are suffering. We have to do all that paperwork, and people are suffering. I think that our technocrats must understand that while they're asking for all these papers and people, real people are suffering. Real people are suffering. And I understand that last night, when the rain came, the folks in Corinth actually had attacks of, they actually had panic attacks. And our technocrats believe they can just allow us, just complicate the matters, send this document, send it back, verify it, and come back. And I mean, it's something that I have said it before. I'm all for transparency and accountability. But when there are emergencies, we have to be flexible to see if we can get that support to the people of the country. And I'm begging the folks at the CDB to see whether we can get these monies as soon as possible so we can improve and we can alleviate the plight of the poor people of St. Lucia. As far as the government is concerned, we have made available $200,000 for the purchase of food and sanitation packets for those affected. We also will give a grant to the Dame Paulette Reedy School so the children can get back to school. We know that household appliances have been damaged. In fact, I understand that most of the houses, all the appliances have been damaged and are no longer of use. So we'll have to get an assessment and see if we can give a grant to these people to help them to purchase their stoves and fridges and their necessities. There's a representative here from the St. Lucia Development Bank. I understand the bank has a special package for householders, which I want to thank them for. So in short, I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank again all those who have assisted, and to tell you the sad news is climate change is real, and it will happen again. It will happen again. We have to prepare for it, and I hope that we can learn from the lessons of Sunday, and each one do what they can to mitigate against the inevitable effects of climate change. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister. So we have a very lengthy program, lots of reports, because I know everyone has, so many agencies have assisted in this recovery effort. So I now would like to call on Ms. Maria Mida, the Acting Director of NEMO, And ladies and gentlemen, we really owe her a resounding round of applause for all the work that she and her team have been doing at the NEMO. Ms. Mira?
Good morning, everybody. Good morning to the head table, Honorable Prime Minister, ministers. We do note that on November 6th, St. Lucia experienced, it was an abnormal trough system. For me, I myself was not in Castries, so I was not aware of what was going on until about 2 o'clock in the afternoon when a neighbor called, and I live in the Corinth area, Asu Canal area, and the neighbor called asking for a boat, you know, and I thought she was joking. And then Fabian calls to say what is happening in Castries. And then it was just now, let's go get into action. And I had to run a mini EOC in Laborie. But having said all of that, you know, the rainfall recorded was 88 millimeters, which is something that is not normal for us in these times. And even when we've had hurricanes, tropical storm Debbie, etc., we have not had that kind of rainfall in such a short space of time. So you can imagine when persons are at their homes and, you know, you're seeing all of this water coming down on you if you live near a drain, or even when the drain has already burst its banks and it's moving at high speed. And what we notice is that a lot of the drains came down with rocks, and, you know, these big rocks coming down. So you have the water and you have the rocks, the noise, it's unusual. So you can understand what people who experience that kind of flooding had to go through. A lot of people still have not recovered and or have not even returned to any halfway sense of normalcy. I received a few calls last evening because it was raining and people were panicking, you know, people have had anxiety attacks. They're telling you they're not going to sleep. Now, I myself cannot sleep because they're not sleeping and I'm wondering what's happening to them. But it was really, really a tragic incident for us. And we need to learn from this. As PM said, climate change is real. You know, we need to stop some of our practices. The dumping of your garbage in the rivers. People decide, okay, I'll not dump it in the river, I'll put it at the back of my house. And these are some of the things the waters took away and it came down full force and had a lot of damages. Bulk garbage is once a month. Ensure that we know what day our bulk garbage is being collected and dispose of it in the proper manner. I want to also say in terms of NEMO's actions, we have partially activated our NEOC, our National Emergency Operations Center, to include the key personnel. We did not do a full activation, but the necessary persons to respond to the flood and the persons who were affected. Areas that were affected were the Corinth, Grand Riviere, Moshi, Bexon, Marc, Union, Rivière-Miton, Lower Monnier, Bois d'Orange, Caimagé, Groseilliers, Balata, Hope Estate, Beau Séjour, Mondidon. And St. Lucia is looking at, so far, based on the assessments that we have made as of 12 November, $1,813.45 in damages. Again, that's initial. By the end of probably next week, we will have a better picture of the damages. And note again, I'm saying damages and not recovery costs because we know there's inflation and so on. So that would probably triple in terms of recovering. The education sector, we had one school that suffered major damage, and that is the Dame Paulette Louise School. The damage is estimated at $780. This also affected the students because you had students on the 780,000, my apology. Really in my dreams. Yes, so that affected the students who were on the ground floor. The entire ground floor was flooded. And the students, from what I'm understanding, still have not been able to return to school. The hotel sector, we had three hotels who suffered major damages. Our assessments also looked at initial assessments looked at about 20 businesses so far in the northern part of the island that have suffered damages, floods. Persons have lost a lot of their equipment and so on. The infrastructure sector, we looked at initial again damages, $854,180. Okay. Rapid assessment for the agricultural industry. They have suffered minor damages, $62,365. WASCO has also indicated that they had some effects on their systems, the Babonneau system, Thibbles treatment, and the distribution to Corinth, Assu Canal, and Rivière-Miton was interrupted, but most of those, these areas, most of the areas have received pipe-borne water. St. Lucia, yesterday we had a meeting with CDEMA. It's an online meeting with CDEMA and its partner agencies. And we are, through CDEMA, having discussions with the international agencies for international aid. St. Lucia has indicated that because the needs assessment and the items that we need can be purchased in country, St. Lucia has requested that we receive donations and contributions in cash, which would make it easier for recovery and disbursements. Needs analysis. The needs analysis was conducted by the district disaster committees, the town council of Gros-Islet, the Ministry of Housing, the St. Lucia Cadet Corps, and the damage analysis and needs assessment team. What they have found was that persons have lost almost 90% of their their livelihoods. Most persons have had to throw away almost everything. Some people are still trying to grab onto the hope that they can still recover some of their items, whether it be their fridges, their beds, and so on. We have looked at an assessment. We have assessed and analyzed 300 homes so far, and that is just initial. We know we have quite a lot of areas to still go into. Number of males assessed, 245. Number of females, 268. Children under 18 years, 132, and infants, 19. The relief response for NEMO is being handled by the Supplies Committee, the National Supplies Committee, through the St. Lucia Cadet Corps, the Youth Emergency Action Committee, known as YEAC. They have gone out and distributed based on the assessments. They have been distributing food packages. We have donated 217 food packages so far. They have donated water, mattresses, baby kits, pillows, water containers, empty buckets to help people clean out. We have also received a large donation of mackerel, mother kits, lentils, blankets from Caritas Antilles, and these have all been distributed to affected families. Having said that they have been distributed, it is not enough based on the extent of damages and the number of persons out there. Our needs list for affected person looks at blankets, pillows, mattresses, feminine hygiene products, children hygiene products, baby diapers, baby formula, drinking water, food supplies, cleaning products, school supplies, notebooks, textbooks, crayons, lunch bag, books, pens, etc., school uniforms, school shoes, tablets, and computers. The Ministry of Health has also arranged psychosocial support for adults who require it at the wellness centers. The Department of Human Services has also reached out to assist children who require psychosocial support, and that will be held at the Corin Secondary School. More information will be coming out from the various agencies as to when this will begin and the times. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mira. I know you said it isn't completed yet, but I think the numbers so far are alarming. And again, we're appealing to St. Lucians to either volunteer your time with the NEMO or to donate goods to the affected households through NEMO. They have targeted intervention, so they will be able to assist. I would now like to invite Honorable Kenson Casimir, the parliamentary representative for Grosley. Honorable Casimir.
Thank you very much, Mondi. I'd like to recognize the head table, Prime Minister, Director of NEMO, members of Cabinet, the media, well wishers, good morning. As a member for Parliament for Grosley, I think what we heard from the Prime Minister was very instructive. I think we know about the realities of climate change and global warming, and we know that we must expect these occurrences frequently, and it's the new normal and the reality we must face. And so for me, as parliamentary representative going forward and in the near future, a number of interventions and undertakings must be established for those most vulnerable in the constituency of Grosley. As such, there are 5 initiatives that I have identified that must be done as soon as possible. 1, the reestablishment of CDRTs in strategic communities in the constituency. Community disaster response teams have been in existence and trained by NEMO in times past. I think it is important that persons in those flood-prone and vulnerable areas be equipped with training in first aid, in the initial response, and I think going forward, this will pay huge dividends when these disasters occur. 2, establishment of a database of persons in those disaster areas to provide weather news blasts as often as possible. We know that in 2022 and beyond, a number of persons have lost interest in watching news, and so it's important for me as the MP to have a database of contact information to provide those updates as soon as they become available, so that in a Flamboyant Drive and in a Windward Island Gas Road, persons can begin to remove their vehicles and other possessions in a strategic way, in a timely fashion. 3, meeting with the Insurance Council to go on an education drive on home insurance, and perhaps to even request more affordable rates for our people in those disaster areas. I think what we saw in areas such as Asso Canal, Rivière-Mita, Monchy, juxtapose that to my interventions and visit to places like Bonterre with persons who had insurance. The feeling within those families were chalk and cheese. Those who had insurance were smiling, those without insurance were crying. And so education and perhaps more conversation needs to be undertaken in that vein. 4, continue to lobby on behalf of the people of Grosley in flood-prone areas for interventions such as Gibeon baskets, frequent desilting, and personal responsibility for in and around their homes in terms of cleanliness. Prime Minister indicated, and I experienced firsthand persons requesting financial payment for cleaning in front of their homes. And as a parliamentary rep for Grosley, I have to say that this is not a practice that I will encourage. I intend to work closely with communities and neighborhoods, but we must learn to help ourselves. 5, going forward, my team has put together a Grosley Friday night telephone event to bring in as much resources from St. Lucia, the region, and of course the world to aid in the recovery efforts for those in need. As the Prime Minister said, the interventions, the paperwork, the red tape is something my people cannot continue to bear patience with. And so as parliamentary rep, whatever we can do as a community to bring in corporate St. Lucia will definitely be undertaken. That being said, I want to thank the Prime Minister and the Cabinet for a swift response to what occurred in Grosley. Their support Their support was timely. I also want to thank NEMO for their strategic interventions throughout the constituency. Volunteer St. Lucia who helped in the cleanup, corporate St. Lucia who has shown their support. WASCO, special mention to Zilta George Leslie, to ensure that water was restored as soon as the requests were made. I also want to thank the Red Cross and the Codeco. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honorable Kenson Casimir, for your representation to the people of Grosley. We know it has been tireless nights, long days, but you have the support of the government and the support of the people of St. Lucia, and we will get through this together. I would now like to call on the parliamentary representative for Castries Southeast, Honorable Joachim Henry, to address us.
Please don't put the last part.
Thank you very much, Miss Louise, and allow me to acknowledge the head table, Prime Minister, Senior Minister, Cabinet Ministers, members of the press, permanent secretaries, the head of NEMO and NEMO staff. Good morning. I think this morning I want to thank the Prime Minister for allowing us the opportunity to speak briefly on what we've done thus far as it relates to the flooding that we experienced on the 6th of November. I wish to thank the many persons who assisted in the recovery effort, but I just wish to highlight some of the areas that I must confess that needs to be considered as we move forward with the issue of climate change, climate adaptation, climate mitigation,
and everything else that is associated with it. Of course, Castries Southeast is not new to issue of flooding, and of course it is very painful that the same residences or the same persons continue to be afflicted with flooding. I can tell you in the month of October, there was flooding in Mark Cronglands. And of course, those of you who understand the geography of our disaster, if you were to impose or superimpose a hazard map over St. Lucia, you would recognize the many rivers and the flooding risk that is in Castries Southeast. In fact, just the community of Mark has about 12 to 15 bridges. All of them are vehicular bridges. And when there's heavy rainfall, normal rainfall in St. Lucia, the turbulence and the reality of life in the community of Mark is real. We've had the issue of settlement, and we know where the people live along the banks of the river in Mark. And in the recent flooding, we experienced some events that is not comfortable for the residents. Some of it includes the dislodgement of, septic tanks into the river, the displacement of water, of fish ponds and what have you. And of course, you understand some of the practices that we have along the rivers in the community of Castries Southeast, including the slaughtering of animals and what have you. So livelihoods are affected. People are living, the residences are affected, and the full impact is yet to be realized even as we continue to think of how we live in the community of Castries Southeast. I am concerned, and I'm expecting that moving forward we will investigate deeper in terms of the mitigating measures. We all speak of the silting, but when you have that level of rainfall, a 200 feet of river at 8 feet wide can only handle approximately 40,000 gallons of water. But when you see millions of gallons of water spreading over Castries Southeast, we know that our waterways are inundated. And even with the silting of 3 feet deep is not adequate. We've discussed with the Ministry of Infrastructure, and we're expecting that we will move forward in having monitors in the rivers to measure not just rainfall, but the height of silt, so that we can desilt or remove silt in a very accurate and scientific way in places where it ought to be removed, but not just randomly investing millions of dollars in the silting, and we do not get value for money or do not find the true impact of what we're doing. Some of the areas that I could inform you that we have done some desilting. When we look at the amount spent in time past, it has been significantly more, but for the same exercise. So we're going to continue to investigate what we are doing with a view of being very efficient and that we could maximize the resources being placed with mitigation measures. But the issue of adaptation is critical, and we will work with the Ministry of Planning to find out who we should relocate to move from the banks of the rivers. How do we deal with the issue of slaughtering? Of course, we need to think of the need of our national abattoir that would have assisted in terms of some of those practices. We've lost the national abattoir in Vieux-Fort. And of course, I recognize that there are many slaughtering practices along the banks of the river in Mark. I'm also thinking of the issue of the need for us to revisit the issue of farming practices, because some of those persons with the fish ponds that were along the banks of the rivers, their livelihoods have been affected, and it is difficult for them to recover within that short space of time. It is indeed hurtful as those who are on the road who have below their homes their concession booths or their small shops. All of these individuals lost their livelihoods, what they were selling, their sugar, everything has been lost. And of course, whereas you would notice the people in Bexar would go on just sweeping their floors and continuing with their life, is that this is happening so often that it becomes almost natural, but the impact is as real as those persons who are affected in other parts of the island. And I do feel for them, and my colleague minister from Grosley the people living in Flamboyant Drive and in those areas that has been affected. The people in Bexar, Mac, have been living this over and over and over for many years. So it is my hope that the issue of adaptation, our land use plans, our hazard maps, our monitors for the silting would be put in place so that we can be very scientific, you know, and very investigative so that we could really have true impact on our population. But I want to thank the Prime Minister for the resources that he has made available thus far as we move into the Christmas season, recognizing that we could have done something else than to respond to disaster, but we do not have a choice because we didn't call it upon ourselves. The work of nature happens, but we will respond. So I want to thank you and look forward as we indulge you and you help us to promote what is right, what is good, what is coming from this table, because our voice is not adequate enough to bring about the sensitization, the good practices that is needed. As PM spoke about so many of them, may you add your voice to ours as we help make our society more resilient. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Honorable Joachim Henry. And moving right along, I would like to call on Honorable Stevenson King, Senior Minister and Minister for Infrastructure, Ports, Transport, Physical Development, and Urban Renewal. We know that he was recalled and gladly came back home to assist and lead the efforts by his ministry after the November 6th Trough. Honorable King, welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam Mistress of Ceremonies, Honorable Prime Minister, colleague ministers, Acting Director of NEMO, Permanent Secretaries, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. Certainly, as the Mistress of Ceremonies indicated, I was recalled on the day of the Trough. And I'm very pleased that I did so, and I was requested to do so, so as to assist in the initial assessment and engagement in response to the flooding which took place, particularly in Flamboyant Drive, Rosalie, and other communities. I must therefore express my own sentiments regarding what took place on that day, and I must commiserate and emphasize with those persons at Flamboyant Drive and the many communities that I visited upon arrival on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, much of it spent with the parliamentary representative for Grosley, who today expressed the real feeling of those of us who care about the people of this country. It was one which showed what life can be within a split second of living comfortably and preparing your daily chores and moving on with life, looking forward, and within a split second you're flooded out and all of your belongings, household effects, appliances, etc., just simply goes down the drain, literally. But we at the Ministry of Infrastructure, Ports, Transport, Physical Development, and Urban Renewal, in carrying out our own assessments in response to what has taken place, have been able to scope and to identify a number of shortcomings. While we agree and accept that what is taking place currently in our world and in our community, in the environment, is as a consequence of climate change, we also recognize that there are other factors which compound the impact of climate change. Not only are we experiencing abnormal weather conditions, as indicated by the director, a low-level trough, which seemed to have been in the, hovering over the entire country, and just a shift of wind direction focused everything in the northern quadrant of the country, causing the kind of abnormal experience that we experience. But more than this, what was reflected by what came downstream was exactly what the Prime Minister said. The garbage, the appliances, the furniture, and all other things that our people normally would find absolutely nowhere to dispose of but in our rivers and our streams and ravines. We in government have attempted to respond to such situations, not now, but many years ago. I see Mr. Raghunanan sitting here this afternoon, and he's from the Environmental Health Department. And I recall as a young man growing up, the Public Health Engineering Unit, PHEU, was very active in cleaning our rivers, manually cleaning our rivers, getting that garbage out and burning it, disposing of it in a meaningful manner. We have moved on, and we started the desilting of rivers to at least attempt to reduce the threat of flooding and, of course, and the disposal of garbage in our communities. So year after year, governments spend anything in the vicinity of $2 to $5 million in desilting. They are normally, or if I should say, there are years when we increase it to $5 million, and there are years when we leave it down at 2.5 million or thereabout. And that is deliberate because there are times when you really need to undertake a tremendous exercise based on activities on our landscape. So in a year when we probably were spared any kind of rain, heavy rain, to silt our rivers, we would probably reduce the figure the following year. So that gives us an opportunity to spend money in other areas. This year, unfortunately, the rumor mongers and those detractors who are hungry for information to destroy the movement, the advancement of this country, seem to have engaged in the propaganda of indicating that there was no desilting program done this year. Let me dispel it now. It is rumor, it is mischievous behavior, and it is an absolute lie on those who claim that our rivers were not desilted. This year, we spent some $2.5 million in desilting, and this is the program here, in great detail. Over 30 pages of desilting programs which were done throughout the country, cleaning drains, ravines, waterways, and rivers in an attempt to protect our people. But what is most revealing in the program, the work program of the ministry, is that in December of 2021, the Prime Minister allocated $4 million to undertake mitigation works and desilting works ahead of the new year. $4 million. In every constituency, in almost every community, where there were not rivers, where there were not ravines or streams, but drains, those such infrastructure was desilted or cleaned up. $4 million. In places where there was a need for retaining walls and retaining structures and retraining of rivers and ravines, part of that, the funding, went into such exercises. That was in December of last year. In May of 2022, we undertook what we call a pre-hurricane desilting and cleanup program. It accounted for $498,967.00. And I've given you it to the cent to give you the understanding that I'm not just churning out figures, but I'm giving you real figures which emanated from the department based on work done in the country. And those figures I am giving you are not monies paid out to people for not doing anything, but monies paid out to individuals who were contracted by the government and who undertook the task of desilting, not persons being paid for doing nothing. And there is a behavior of that nature, but not in this government, of paying people for doing nothing. And then the desilting program of $2 million, which was undertaken between June, July, August, and as recent as October, when certain areas we realized that we needed to probably move in and do some desilting. So I hope that those who are listening and those who have received this information will now understand that when the lies are being propagated, that the truth will always come to pass. And the truth is that in this cycle of the hurricane season, there was a mitigation and cleanup campaign which was done in December of last year, costing $4 million. Mitigation works, retaining walls, etc., adaptation works, etc., and cleanup. A pre-hurricane cleanup program of $498,967.04, and of course, desilting at $2 million. I do hope this clears the air. Now, having said this, we have been able to go on ground and to do the necessary reconnaissance to determine the impact of the flooding in the areas affected and the damage caused to the infrastructure of the country, whether it's a landslide, whether it's the fallen retaining walls, etc., etc. We have been able to do this, and we have assessed, and work will start work has already started in what I call the preliminary exercise of cleaning up. And that will cost us $854,180 in cleanup. In Grosley, in Babonneau, in Castries North, Castries Central, Castries Southeast, Castries East, all of those areas will be cleaned up in the coming days, or in the coming days as we move on. In Grosley, the largest expenditure will be in Grosley at $356,500 in cleanup, etc., etc. That is for public infrastructure. It doesn't entail private infrastructure, damage to property, private homes, or what I call social infrastructure, as the minister and the parliamentary representative for for Grosley indicated. That will come in another way. And that is in Zone 2, in Zone 1. In Zone 2, Castries North, Castries Southeast, and Babonneau. Castries North, $45,300. Castries Southeast, $9,000. Babonneau, $187,000. Then we move to Anstey, which is in Anstey is in Zone 7, $64,980. And in Castries and in Zone 8A, which also includes a section of Castries North, it will be $31,600, and Castries East, $43,400. And in Zone 8B, which also comprises Castries Southeast, $106,500, and that, together with some minor works to be done in Library of $4,300, Soufriere of $5,600. Minor works which occurred also during that period of time, totaling an amount of $854,180. All of the works, most of the works have started in terms of desilting, on blocking drains, etc., etc., throughout the country. But moving forward, the Ministry of Infrastructure has seen the need to schedule the way forward. So the initial cleanup, which I've just mentioned, is on the way. The cleanup to ensure that our roadways are cleared, and we were able to do that within the first 2 days. And we are continuing with now unblocking of waterways, etc., like some which I saw in Monnier and other areas, La Rivière-Mitan, etc. The assessment of a comprehensive assessment of the overall damage caused and the reconstruction of the infrastructure, I should dare say the reinstatement of the infrastructure, is ongoing as we speak. And we're hoping that before the end of this week, that we will be able to present the Prime Minister with the cost for reconstruction. Reconstruction will entail reinstatement of roads to their original form, replacement of retaining structures, retaining walls, etc., and repairs to drainage damage as a consequence of the rain. But most importantly is the third component, which I refer to as the futuristic. What is the future of our infrastructure in this country? This year, we are to launch what we call Infrastructure 2030. And some of what we will present to the general public as Infrastructure 2030, which really is a plan which speaks to what is likely to be the infrastructure of need by the year 2030 and beyond, rather than to wait and to respond as we often have to respond only when things go down. So it's not just only a matter of maintaining your infrastructure, to extend the life expectancy of that infrastructure, but to be able to build with resiliency so that infrastructure can withstand the climate change and some of the patterns that we have seen over the years. So as I move around and I look and I see what has happened, there are some things we cannot change. We cannot change the faults of the past, of those who developed this country, but we must at least appreciate what we are into. What we are into is a situation where the climate has changed and we have unusual weather patterns. But we must also appreciate the fact that if you're to think back to, say, 1950, the population of St. Lucia is probably half of what it is today. The housing situation in the country was totally different. So you had smaller houses, smaller rooftops, less water going down onto the surface, and less runoff. Today, when you consider what has happened, we are building not only on the plains, in the valleys of, say, Corinth, etc., and Goodlands and Crownlands, rather, in Mark and those areas, but we are also building on the hillside. Not only have we denuded the hillside for agricultural purposes, but we have also built and building much bigger houses with a greater capacity of runoff water through drains that run a lot quicker and causing what we call flash flooding. So we've got to now begin to start thinking, how do we deal with such situations? For us, we believe that we need to conduct a major study, particularly of areas like Corinth, which has been in existence for probably about 30 years now, and to be able to look at the rivers to see what sort of adaptation and mitigation works that are needed to allow such rivers to be able to accept the capacity of the runoff and the hydraulics of the river to avoid any flooding. So that may be not necessarily, and I shouldn't say not necessarily, I believe it should be away from the silting, but putting in place retaining structures that can accept that water and take it down to its logical destination. And we also have to deal with the problem of Corinth, which is one of how do we deal with the mangrove. Every year, when we need to desilt, the environmentalists say the mangrove you cannot touch. The mangrove, yes, has its purpose of being able to sift and to rejuvenate the environment, but it also does what we call the retention of the flow of water, which causes flooding. And these are some of the issues that we must deal with. The other issue we must deal with is the practice of persons building on the river bank, the buffer. The buffer is necessary to be kept, not just as having a buffer, and I'm sure the Ministry of Agriculture will tell you more about having buffers on the riverbanks, but also it gives you an opportunity to clean the ravines, clean the drains, and not allow them to be clogged, and when the heavy rains come down, they just send the garbage all over the place. So we have to look forward to mitigation and adaptation measures. We must look to mapping, hazard mapping, zoning, and land use. And that must be done by the Department of Physical Development to strengthen our DCA laws and policies to ensure that when persons come for approval for housing or to come with a plan for a subdivision for housing development, that we must now go to the data. What is the data saying? Is that a floodplain? And so it means that we need to be able to collect a lot more data that will inform us as to the best land use of the various areas in St. Lucia. So you may have to take a decision. Do you put housing here in a place that may look during the dry season as being a very nice flat area for housing, but you may have to decide this is not the place for housing unless you have some scientific and mechanical instruments that will be able to pump out that water quickly when it comes down. So we have to get the planning to determine where do people build, the distances away from the rivers, et cetera, so we zone those areas and dictate the land use throughout the country and to see how well we can adapt to climate change. I am hoping that in the coming years that some of those initiatives will commence and we don't just simply say we will do, but we certainly put action and put things into motion, into action, and to get it done to the benefit of the people of St. Lucia. So I want to thank you very much and to say to you that the Department of Infrastructure is assiduously engaging in the various communities in an attempt to respond to some of the many requests that have been made by people. People are requesting the improvement of roads. They're requesting responses to the damage caused by the trough, by the rains, the flooding. We understand all of those. We'd like to fulfill all of their needs. At the same time, we are challenged at this time, while we are attempting to maintain the roads, that the weather condition is not the ideal time for doing road construction or rehabilitation. I want to thank you very much, and I wish you the very best.
Thank you, Honorable Stevenson King. A good takeaway for us is land use policies, and I know that St. Lucia doesn't possess one, so that may be something to really look into. And just going back to, there's been a lot of debate, a lot of suggestions, and one opinion I saw on social media was how communities were named. So Ravin Poisson and Asu Canal, Rivière Mita, these things tell you, I guess our history and our naming tells you how communities got their names, and Earl Huntley provided that little history. So we understand why a place like Asu Canal and Rivière Mita experienced a lot of the flooding, and a history informed the Grand Rivière, informed some of the things that we saw. The river will always take its natural course, and we really need to learn from that for our future building codes. I would now like to call on Honorable Dr. Pauline Antoine Prosper to give us an update from the Ministry of Education. Dr. Antoine Prosper.
Good morning, everybody. Members of the head table, Honorable Prime Minister, Director of NEMO, other cabinet colleagues, a pleasant good morning. All of us would appreciate the adjustments that the education sector had to make in light of COVID. We know the challenges that parents had to endure on the return of their children to school, and the government of St. Lucia had to assist parents who had lost their jobs, etc., to ensure that our children returned to school. We would also appreciate the learning loss that has taken place. And the November 6th trough only exacerbated the situation. A number of our schools were affected. The Dame Paulette Louisy suffered the most damage. But we also had Babono Primary, Corinth Secondary, St. Lucia's Sports Academy, Bocage Secondary, Ave Maria Girls, RC Boys. All of those schools had some sort of damage. At this point, I would like to thank the teachers and the principals who came out, in some cases putting their lives on the line, to try to secure school materials that water was taking away. Honorable Sean Edwards visited some of those schools the following day and would have appreciated the extent of the damage. There was much damage to school infrastructure. In fact, a lot of school infrastructure was very much compromised. There was damage to furniture and equipment, student and teacher furniture. Books were lost, computers, printers, cupboards, what have you. And at Dame Paulet, the infant department was severely affected. Therefore, the students of kindergarten and grade 1 would have had to stay home when the other students from the school returned to school on Monday for face-to-face instruction. And you'd have said, well, our little ones are the ones who need face-to-face the most. But since they are housed on the bottom floor, they have to do remote learning at this time. There was flooding up to 3 feet at Dame Paulet Louise, compromising electrical outlets. At some schools, there were roof leaks, resulting in compromised electricals. We also observed that there was growth of mold spores at some of the schools. Waterlogged flooring, popping tiles, uneven floor surfaces. In some instances, there were busted sewer lines and collapsed soccerways. At some schools, we also had broken fences. All of this compromising the health and safety of our students and the staff of the schools. Dame Paulet Louise presently adopts, as I said before, remote learning for kindergarten and grade 1. But fortunately, the other students are having face-to-face instruction. Preliminary estimates suggested that there was about $780,000 worth of damage. However, estimates for Dame Paulet Louise alone is about 1.3 million. And an amount of 2.4 million is a conservative estimate for the works to be done on the schools that have suffered damage. It's sad to say that the Ministry of Education does not have a budget to support the urgent works identified. Where possible, we are providing textbooks to students from our available supplies from the bursary program. I am not afraid because I know I have a Prime Minister that I can count on, and he will do everything possible to ensure that our students are back at school and they get the necessary resources. I know he will find it. And I know our corporate citizens have come in to assist, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank them immensely for their efforts in assisting our schools. The Corinth Secondary School is open for instruction during the day, but on evenings it is open for psychosocial support for the residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Antoine Prosper, for your brief. So I'd now like to move on to the Ministry of Agriculture, specifically the Department of Agricultural Services, and invite Mr. Kemuel Jabatis to give us an update from the Ministry of Agriculture.
Good morning. Mistress of Ceremonies, permit me to adopt the protocol that has been established in the interest of time. You've heard a lot said here today about the unplanned disaster that took place on November 6th. It is a textbook event. And when I say textbook event, in the early 90s, we would have been in Fort Jacques and Choiseul talking to farmers about the impact of forest denudation and clearing and reckless cultivation. Historically, agriculture would have been the biggest culprit in such an event. But from all indications, you're beginning to recognize that developments in our watersheds are beginning to pose some serious challenges. And so I would like to reiterate what our Prime Minister and, of course, our Minister for Physical Planning has emphasized: the need for controlled development and regularized development. Because I can't remember who said it, but in a forum, someone said this is no longer about climate adaptation and mitigation, it's climate survival. Because no measure of adaptation and mitigation is going to stop these events from happening. And so we necessarily need to prepare ourselves essentially for survival. I keep hearing the name Rivière Mitan popping up, and I'm seeing some serious proposals for developments at Rivière Mitan. So we perhaps need to pay a lot more closer attention to these developments. So for the next few minutes, hopefully not too many, 5 minutes or so, I would like to give you an update of what we've been doing at agriculture in terms of data collection and what we have seen at the field and community levels. There was a presentation, a PowerPoint prepared, but I'm not sure if it is going to be placed on your screen so you could follow easily as we go through this. So forestry was impacted. Agriculture, and when we say agriculture, we're referring to livestock, crop propagation was also impacted, and fisheries also was impacted by the flash flood. For the fisheries sector, the impact was felt mostly by the facilities that have been set up by government itself to support majorly the aquaculture industry and aquaponics. So you're looking at the Union Agricultural Facility where we have a section for the fisheries and aquaculture. We experienced some damages where about 1,000 fish fingerlings, 7,000 shrimp breeding stock, 1,800 tilapia were lost in the flood, looking at a replacement cost of about $15,405. Also, the fencing in that area was destroyed, about 1,000 or so feet of fencing destroyed at an approximate replacement cost of about $50,000. And one vehicle got flooded out, a ministry vehicle. It is anticipated the repair cost will be in the range of about $5,000. Again, forestry suffered some damage, but again, it's the facility that is used to support forestry and agroforestry initiative. It's a forestry facility at Union again. The damage was minimal, and there will be need for riverbank stabilization. That river that goes through Union, the forestry facility sits near the banks, and so we would need to go in there to stabilize the banks to ensure that there is not encroachment of the rivers in situations like we experienced on November 6th. So about an approximate 1,000 feet of fencing has been reported as damaged, and the repair cost of that would be in the range of about $20,000. Our livestock sector suffered some losses, agricultural livestock. About 14 farmers were reported as having suffered impact. We lost about 59 animals total in the process. Some of you might have seen some bloated cows somewhere in the Union area on the riverbank. Thankfully, no farmer was lost trying to save his cow. We've had those situations in the past. About 6 farm holdings suffered infrastructural damage, and the reported value of the losses to the livestock sector is an estimated $33,000. The agriculture plant propagation station that those of you who are plant enthusiasts would have visited at Union, about 1,500 feet of fencing needs to be repaired or replaced, and at an approximate cost of about $60,000. Some planting material, about 2,500 citrus plants, oranges, tangerines, and so on were lost. So an approximate value of $37,500. The demonstration farm, we have the Taiwanese and the Ministry of Agriculture running a demonstration farm. We had some losses there as well, about $8,600. And so the total cost of damages and perhaps repairs and replacement for agriculture propagation is in the range of about $102,700. The crop sector was badly impacted. And some of the areas that were impacted would include majorly the Maki floodplain. Most of you, if not all of you, would be aware that a lot of our agriculture takes place along floodplains, in valleys, and of course, being a mountainous country, we have agricultural activities on the slopes, and weather like this is damaging to both locations. The slopes, we experience slope failure, land slippage, and down in the flat, we experience flooding. The flooding is a double-edged sword for farmers because flooding normally says that there's going to be new siltation, and later on when it's reincorporated into the soil, there is an expected increase in productivity. But as it stands, 50 farmers were impacted in the Region 1 and 2 area. That would include from Grosile running across to Forestier, Barbonon, those areas, and about $712,650 worth of crop losses were reported, and that would include crop loss as well as infrastructural loss. About 46 farmers were reported impacted in the Region 8, which would be Bexo and surrounding areas, with a total loss of about $273,302, bringing the cost of damage and loss to the crop subsector of about $985,952. So by way of a summary table, fisheries was impacted, forestry was impacted, agriculture, crop, agriculture, livestock, and agricultural propagation station totaling $1,212,057.00. Ladies and gentlemen, just by way of additional recommendation, there are recommendations for adaptation and mitigation actions, and these are geared towards more resilient food security and nutrition. We need to continue the silting of main drains and culvert repairs, the clearing of natural waterways, and there's a proposed $500,000, hopefully, that could be made available so that these activities can be undertaken. One of the things that I would like to note as we're talking about desilting and so on, the desilting actually is a science. And you know, you go into those rivers, and sometimes the ministries send out, contractors, but the desilting should not happen in and of itself. There has to be a vegetative or vegetation action that immediately follows the desilting. Because usually what happens, the rivers are desilted, the banks become unstable, and when events like this take place, because there is no vegetation to protect the banks, you have increased loss of silt and so on, and siltation. And so we would like to encourage, as rivers have been desilted, that the Ministry of Agriculture become one of the partners to make recommendations for fast-growing vegetation that will recover those banks. Of course, we're looking at, hopefully, through various programs and projects of the ministry, look at issues related to slope and watercourse stabilization, which I just mentioned, and of course, trying to set up siltation ponds and traps in the watershed. And I'm happy that the Minister for Physical Planning has made mention of some of the key actions. Bexon is going to be a recurring decimal, and if you think Corinth was bad, it's going to get exponentially worse. Because with all these houses in the watershed, I don't think folks understand that the watershed includes all the pathway of the water, and so we need to take these actions quickly, and also to engage our communities and to ensure that they understand and they buy into those recommendations that we are making for our country development. Ladies and gentlemen, this is all the updates that I have for you at this time. So I'd like to thank you on the behalf of the ministry for hearing us out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jean-Baptiste. And it's just a lot of information. I know it may seem long, but it is very important to chart the way forward, to give people an overview of what we are facing and how we build back better, how we grow. And I learned that today actually about the desilting and regeneration of the riverbanks. So, Minister for Infrastructure, you have some synergies to create with the Minister of Agriculture. I would now like to call on Mr. Ragnanan and Mr. Joseph, who will provide us an update from the Ministry of Health. So, Mr. Joseph will come first.
Good morning to all. Thank you, Mrs. Lewis. And I must take this opportunity to acknowledge the head table, the Prime Minister, senior ministers, Director of the National Emergency Management Organization, and the rest of the participants of this important session. We recognize the many interventions as it relates to the impact of climate change, as pointed out by many of the previous speakers. And to note is that the Ministry of Health acknowledges the need for us to build resiliency when it comes to climate change. As such, we must say that the Ministry of Health is currently working on its Health National Adaptation Plan, which would allow the ministry to prioritize its action as it relates to addressing the impact of climate change at all levels in its planning. With regards to the November 6th flash flooding, the ministry would have conducted an assessment, and along with Mr. Ragnanan, the Chief Environmental Health Officer, we are going to present the Ministry of Health response. We have recognized, first of all, that there has been no damage to the health infrastructure within the Ministry of Health. But we do note that persons, both clinical and non-clinical within the ministry, have been impacted like many others, and as such, indirectly, it will impact our operation at some level. As such, the ministry continues to put measures in place to limit the health impact of those affected by the flooding and to maintain its surveillance and to identify health issues that arise from the flooding. One key area we recognize, as many would have pointed out, the need for mental health support. And I will inform that the ministry has put together a team of community mental health aid, our psychiatric nursing practitioners, our psychotherapists, and support staff to provide the needed psychological support that those impacted really need at this point. Persons can access such psychological supports at the wellness centers, but in particular at the Grosse Lake Polyclinic, the Grand River, Morshe, Babanu, and Bexa wellness centers. And these services can be accessed from 8 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. Beyond 4 o'clock, we do have a mechanism in place where persons can communicate or contact the community nurses, and through this mechanism, they can access the mental health support. We also have mechanism in place to account for the weekend, and we work closely with the National Emergency Management Organization to ensure persons have the necessary mental health support. as only last night we have been working collaboratively to ensure that persons receive such, and we have our health team conducting follow-up today to ensure that the persons are mentally sound as it relates to the impact, because persons are going to suffer a range of mental health issues, including anxiety, depression, among others. We recognize also that persons suffering with or having non-communicable diseases like diabetes, hypertension, heart diseases are at risk for worsening of their condition, and we encourage these persons to access the facilities to ensure that their condition are controlled. And for those who would have lost their medication or prescription during the flood, that you access your respective pharmacies, especially those within the community, to ensure that you continue taking your medication to maintain your overall health. We see the need, and as pointed out with the report from Ministry of Education as to the impact of mold, this is something we need to be mindful of, as it's likely to increase things like allergy or respiratory illnesses of persons who are within those environments. And so we encourage persons to ensure adequate ventilation of those buildings, their homes, and to apply measures that will reduce their risk of exposure, and measures that will allow safe cleaning of the environment. We did hear of the many objects discarded as garbage that poses a risk for holding of water that can breed mosquitoes, and we know the risk of dengue and leptospirosis from rodents. And at this point, I must, in closing, indicate that with the flooding, there is the risk for contamination of food and water. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Paco Ragnanan, our Chief Environmental Health Officer, to continue with the rest of the presentation from the Ministry of Health. Thank you.
Good morning again to all, and I would like to adopt the protocols established. At the Ministry of Health, we recognize the importance of post-disaster response, especially towards disaster like the flash flooding that was experienced. And critically, that really came to the fore were the issues of water potability and water safety, the issue of food safety, and we know that there were flooding with some business places, food establishments, and other establishments, and we also are concerned with the overall issue of vector-borne diseases. And as such, immediately after the disaster, a press statement was prepared and sent out to inform the public in general with regards to safety precautions that needed to be adopted to protecting themselves. One would have to do with the issue of food safety, which is very, very critical. And previous experience have taught us that there is a tendency to have what we call cold slaughter. And that is animal who may have drowned, cattle and other livestock, that people would actually use this meat for consumption. And so we were very clear in warning against cold slaughtering. And also the issue of disposal of carcasses. That is important. And there is the tendency that people do not take ownership for dead animals. And generally you have a problem where you have a dead cow or dead pig or dead dog somewhere, and nobody wants to take ownership, and it becomes a problem when it begins to decay and decompose. And so the whole issue of taking responsibility for ensuring the safe disposal of these animals. What we found is that in many places in the Corinth area and all the way through to Cap Estate, including some of our hotels, experienced losses. And among them had to do with large losses of food products. As we speak, we are still in the process of arranging disposal of food items. In some instances, the there are business places that lost a number of containers filled of items. And so the total magnitude now cannot be disclosed. It's ongoing. But sufficing to say that large volumes of food items have been lost because of the flood waters. And a lot of it has been disposed. However, the disposal process is still ongoing as we speak. We recognize that there were issues with water supply, especially for households that have connections to the Hill 20 treatment facility. And we were informed that because of the intake being clogged at the Marquis and the Louisi catchment facilities, that created some issues. And so there was no water immediately after that disaster in the Bogus area, in the Gara area, and the Debarra area, along with the Corinth and so forth. But having said that, the issue of no water was one issue. But we are happy to report that in all areas where there was water, it was potable. And that meant that it had met the requirements for being in distribution. So the safety of that water was not questionable. The ongoing monitoring revealed that after a couple of days, that in most of these areas, there was a gradual return of water in distribution. And we think that was important because a lot of places were calling and asking, where can we get water to assist with cleaning, especially with homes that have been flooded and there is silt and mud that had been built up. And it was important for a steady supply of water to assist with the cleanup operations. As far as vector control is concerned, this year has been unprecedented in terms of rainfall. And we know with rainfall, heavy rainfalls, the tendency for collecting water and allowing for proliferation of mosquitoes, especially Aedes aegypti mosquito, is paramount. In 2020, St. Lucia had a major outbreak of dengue fever, and unfortunately there were some deaths as well. And we really do not want an occurrence of these outbreaks. We have continued a very clinical fogging exercise, but that in itself is just one intervention. We need to have the continuous, what we call the integrated vector management system in operation, where householders, business places, communities, sporting organizations, mothers and fathers groups, and other agencies, the schools come together and work together in terms of reducing the levels of mosquitoes and other vectors that are breeding on their premises. No longer can fogging do the job. As we know that you have a very short window to fog, because the Aedes aegypti mosquito, based on their feeding habits, they come out early in the morning and early evening. So we call it the dusk and the dawn period. That's when they come out. So if we go out at 10 o'clock in the day to fog, it would be a useless activity. That is why you need to be very strategic in fogging. However, we recognize that even with fogging, there is what is called insecticide resistance. And so you've heard, and maybe you've experienced that the chemicals you are spraying in at home no longer is effective as it once was. So we have to be guided and guarded in terms of fogging. But it is just to kill the adult mosquito. And because of climate change, what you find is, whereas a mosquito from egg to adult would have taken 7 days, now it's shortened, it takes 5 days. So that cycle must be repeated every 5 days. And it's really not something that is feasible for you to conduct. But we continue our fogging activities, but that is just one such activity. And we need to continue to monitor, especially in the flooded areas where you may have a proliferation of mosquitoes and rodents that can redound to mosquito or vector-borne diseases. And so these are some of the activities that we are engaging at present, and we would continue to provide support to the agencies, especially those that need our support for food safety, and also to continue our vector management exercises and activities, as well as continue to support in terms of monitoring the water supply island-wide to ensure safety and potability. I thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Ragnanan provided us with a good segue into WASCO. We will now have the officer in charge, Mrs. Zilta George Leslie, to give an assessment of her organization.
Thank you very much, Mistress of Ceremonies. Honorable Prime Minister, who I assume is somewhere around, Honorable Stevenson King, Senior Minister, other cabinet colleagues, other ministers of government, Director of NEMO, ladies and gentlemen, St. Lucia, good morning. It's afternoon now. Good afternoon. Okay, we are going to be giving you an update as to what transpired with the Trough, which took place on November the 6th. As most of you are aware, we run two major systems in the north of the island. So we have the John Compton Dam system and we have the Hill 20 system. The Hill 20 system feeds the Babono region and the John Compton Dam system feeds everywhere from Millet through to Cap Estate. Thankfully for us, we had no adverse effects at the John Compton Dam system, so that was very good. However, our Hill 20 system took quite a bit of damage. So we had a lot of our intakes which were clogged. We had the Talvan intake, as Mr. Raghunanan explained to you. We have the Marquis intake, which was also seriously clogged. And as a result of that, we have now had to augment our supply to the Hill 20 Babono region. So what we have had to do is really to take the water which we are producing at Cicero, which is the water from the JCD, the John Compton Dam system, and we have now had to use that water, and thankfully we have a line which serves from Cicero through to Hill 20, and that line was not damaged, so we have been able to augment that system with the water that we are producing at our Cicero treatment plant. So I will give you now a little bit on what transpired in the north of the island, specifically in areas such as our Corinth, Assou Canal, Rivière Mitan, Piat, Grand Rivière, Norbert, Degazo, and those areas. Flamboyant Drive and Windward Island gases, these two areas were really severely impacted by this trough, and WASCO thankfully was able to restore water to those areas. So we are very happy that we were able to restore water to those two areas. We also have had a few damaged main pipelines. So we've had a 4-inch diameter pipeline, which was our cast iron pipeline along the Corinth Bridge. That has been damaged. We have been able to repair that. I would like to report that we've been able to repair that. We've also been able to repair our 4-inch damaged ductile iron pipe at the Mark Bridge. We have also been able to repair our 2-inch Monnier-Degazo line, which runs across the river in Monnier, and where we had about 15 lengths of pipe were totally and completely lost in that area. We also had a 4-inch line at our Forasso Bridge, and that has also been repaired. As it relates to our customers and their service lines, we've had quite a few damage to customers' service lines, especially in the Corinth region, Corinth, Grand Rivière, Piat, those areas. So what WASCO was able to do was to install meters for those customers and restore the supply to them, because in a lot of areas, the meters were totally washed away. And usually we don't like to interfere with the customer service lines because we tell them anything after the meter is your responsibility. But considering all the damage that was caused in this disaster, we have been able to repair quite a few of those meters, and we have been able to repair the service lines for the customers. The Prime Minister said earlier that the system is going to come back we are going to have some more flooding. But what has happened with us, unfortunately for us, last night we got quite a bit of damage. So Prime Minister, you were very, very correct on that. It happened a lot sooner than we expected. And as a result of that, all of our intakes in the Hill 20 system are currently back down. So we were able to, after the trough, we were able to desilt, we were able to unclog some of our pumps, especially in Marquis and Talvan. But unfortunately, last night's rains have caused further damage to our systems. So we have a situation now where Talvan is back down, Marquis is back down, our gravity intake, which is on the millet side, is also down. So we have now to go back and start again to further unclog those intakes, do further repairs, desilting of our intakes. We have some damaged pumps as well as a result of the silt which came in as early as last evening. So we have had to go back and unchoke those lines. So we're working right now as we speak, as we are here. We have the staff on board doing those further repairs. We also had a power outage last night. Yes, so that has affected the Mon area. Yes, so the power outage in the Mon has really stopped our water that we were actually shifting from Hill 20 back to from Cicero, back to our Hill 20 systems. So because of that, from 5 p.m. yesterday afternoon, we have experienced even further difficulties. Usually we have 3 pumps on at Hill 20. Right now we are only servicing 2 of those pumps. And as a result, we have areas such as Carolee, Balata, Timon, Fairway, Union, Almondale, and Mondidor are going to experience difficulty, because as long as we're taking the water from Cicero to augment Hill 20, those other areas are going to be affected. So it's unfortunate that as we were trying to get everything back on track, and I was really hoping to report this morning that everything was, almost back to our normal pattern, we now have some further setbacks. The south of the island also, because of some rains that we experienced last night, got some very serious damage. I'm not sure that everybody was aware that all of that damage took place last night, but we have Deriso, Miku, Grace and Beausejour, our canneries, Passias and Bellevue systems, all in the south, currently are down. We have our Delse system where we have a damaged line. Our crews are currently working assiduously to repair those damages. And once they are completed, the supply will be restored, hopefully later today. The Sufra area has been doing very well because these are spring sources. So anywhere we have spring sources, for example, our Ruby intakes, Diamond 1 and 2, Fosse Jacques, all of these are spring sources. So as a result of that, Soufrière is on track and Soufrière is constantly receiving water. We, of course, want to offer our support to the government and the people of St. Lucia. We want to ensure that the public is aware that we are here to serve them. We are here to listen. We are here to answer. We are here to help. So WASCO, at this point in time, we've given you our telephone contacts. We'd give them to you again for the control room. It's 457-3958, and we have 457-3960. We also have a contact with our WhatsApp, so you could also reach us on 482-0052. Those of you who would like to send us a message to let us know what areas are severely impacted. And as the hurricane season is not quite over, we're also looking towards our cruise sector. Our cruise ship season is going to be reopening very soon. Yes, right about now. We can't be too sure. And with that season opening, we will have, of course, an influx of ships coming in, and we're going to have a greater demand. So we all obviously have to do a lot of rationing. We have to do a lot of sharing. We have to ensure that everybody is fed. We're going to ensure that everybody gets a supply. And from as early as this evening, our teams are going to be on the road even in the evenings to ensure that any damages, any damaged pipelines from the rains last night will also be repaired. So I think that's pretty much for us at WASCO. And like I said, we're here to support the government and the people of St. Lucia. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. George Leslie, for that comprehensive report. And I mean, I'm hearing it from everyone, but if the public isn't sure, to note that we are not out of this season, and it seems that it is going to be longer and any time. So as much as possible, to secure your households, to secure your belongings, and practice some better mitigation despite the weather and its unpredictability. I would now like to call on Mr. George Victorin, Acting Fire Chief, to present to us. Mr. Victorin.
Good afternoon to all. I'd like to recognize our Prime Minister, Honorable Philippe J. Pierre, other cabinet colleagues, as well as Director of NIMU, and other persons present. I would like to report on the response of the protective services, in particular the fire department and police, for the flood on Sunday, November 6th. We received the first call of assistance at approximately 20 to 2 in the afternoon. And while we are not expecting any flooding, the fire department and police were not caught off guard because we are emergency services, emergency responders. So we had contingencies in place to respond to those calls. The first call came in at, as I said, about 20 to 2 for assistance at the near the Darren Sami Cricket Stadium, for a motorist was driving through floodwaters and was compromised and needed assistance. And soon after, about 10 past 2, there was another call for assistance for Asu Canal, where residents indicated that they were trapped in their house due to rising floodwaters. And all our responses were in the Grosley area. Fortunately, we were able to use our swift water rescue team, specialized swift water rescue team, located at the Grosley Fire Station, using officers and equipment from Grosley, Babuno, and Fire Service Headquarters in Castries. Our next call came in soon after at about 10 to 3, and there were multiple requests received for assistance in the Corinth area near Windward Island Gases, behind Lime, for assistance from residents for flooding, and they complained that the rising water got them trapped into their homes. Another call was soon received for assistance by a member of the Grosley Disaster Committee, and she reported that she had already mobilized members of a team and were providing assistance to persons in her area. We also, about 3:15, there was a call in the Union area where a motorist was being swept away by floodwaters. He was caught in his car, and there was request for assistance. In total, we had over a dozen calls for assistance, and the first call, as we said, came just about 20 to 2, and the last call we received was about 8 o'clock in the night, where we had a female who called for 2 persons who needed rescue at the Piat Grand Riviere area. But in all, we are very happy to report that there was no reported loss of life or serious injury as a result of the incident, and all the persons who called were assisted either by the fire department, who were able to access them, or with the assistance of residents in the area who were very helpful in assisting persons to evacuate or be rescued when they needed to. What are the challenges that we face as a protective service in responding to this incident? Well, initially it was difficult to access most of the areas because of the rising floodwater. Most of the areas were inaccessible, but using our heavy fire appliances, we were able to reach some of those persons. Unfortunately, during our response, we have 2 of our appliances who broke down because most of our equipment fleet, our fire appliances, ambulances, close to 20, some of them close to 20 years. You know, so we really need to look into how we can replace those equipment because, as we said earlier, these incidents are happening a lot more frequently, and we need to be in a position to provide assistance to the people when they need us. And we also realize there's a need to beef up our specialized swiftwater rescue teams. We have 2 teams currently, in fact 3, one located at Grosile, one at Dennery, one at Vieux-Fort, which are historically the prone areas in St. Lucia. But we realize that most of the communities now, like Soufrière and these areas, and Slurry Canneries, we are having frequent floods in those areas, so we need to prepare and put contingencies in place to deal with flooding in those areas. And going forward, it was the MP for Grosile who mentioned teams being trained in the communities. We are working with NEMO in training members of the community in CERT community emergency rescue teams, so that when we have those incidents, we have first responders from the community who can assist those in trouble, because very often, depending on the nature of the incident, the fire department or the police may not be able to access those areas right away. So we need persons from the community who can provide that kind of assistance to assist the people. And of course, with the police, those persons who evacuated their homes, the police had to be on high alert to protect those properties that were evacuated, because we know sometimes the criminal elements, these are the times that they use when persons evacuate their homes, their property, to move in. So the police had a critical role to play in ensuring that those properties were protected. So in summary, while there were no serious loss of life or physical injury, and I stress on the word physical, because much has been said about the psychological impact of those being affected in the area, and health has mentioned the need to provide psychological assistance to those persons. But very often when we speak of psychological assistance, we tend to forget the first responders who are always the first on scene, police, fire, who assist those persons. We are affected as well. So in your organization for assistance, psychological assistance, please remember the police, the fire service, who are always the first on scene for these incidents. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Victor, and again, thank you for your services. Our last presentation, hopefully some good news, from the General Manager of the St. Lucia Development Bank, Mr. Cornelius Sidodi. Welcome.
Thank you, Mistress of Ceremonies.
Let me acknowledge the Honorable Prime Minister, the Senior Minister, Cabinet Ministers, other members of the head table, distinguished guests, and everyone present. Good morning to all. I will comment on SLB's St. Lucia Development Bank's response to the flash floods of November 6, 2022. So on November 6, St. Lucia witnessed the impact of a sudden and severe weather occurrence, which was without doubt associated with climate change. St. Lucia Development Bank, in its capacity as the nation's climate bank, immediately decided to take action to assist the persons who were affected. Our assistance will be through a cash donation and a soft loan package. St. Lucia Development Bank is making a cash donation of $20,000 to go towards households that were directly affected by the flash floods. We are also pleased to announce a soft loan package on very favorable terms to further assist the affected households. Soft loans will be granted under the following innovative and favorable terms. The loans to a maximum of $20,000 per household. No security will be required. The interest rate will be a concessionary rate of 4.5%. There will be no payment required for up to 3 months from the first disbursement. So there's actually a grace period on both the principal and the interest for the first 3 months of the facility. There's no application or other associated fees. The repayment period will be for up to 5 years. We are looking at same-day approval and disbursement within 72 hours. The bank needs to determine the applicant's ability to repay, so a salary slip and a job letter will be required. In addition, the bank needs to verify the applicants were indeed adversely impacted by the flash floods and that the amount applied for the support or estimate through estimates or invoices will go towards repairs, replacement of furniture, appliances, equipment, drainage, retaining walls, etc. I'm also aware that the Prime Minister is a proponent of efficiency and ease of doing business, and as such, the St. Lucia Development Bank guarantees a hassle-free process. It is as generous and as simple as that. St. Lucia Development Bank recognizes that such severe weather conditions are likely to become more prevalent. SLDB will continue to provide funding for climate-related interventions through programs such as our Climate Adaptation Financing Facility and other packages specifically designed to build resilience and adapt to the vagaries of climate change. So this I present to the people of St. Lucia and the people who are affected by the weather system. I thank you very much.
Truly some good news after all these reports, and thank you to the St. Lucia Development Bank, and I know those who can will profit the opportunity and access these soft loans. So with that, I would like to thank you all for joining us. We have the numbers again on the screen for St. Lucians who would like to assist in the relief effort. And again, thank you to all the volunteers who are tirelessly working with NEMO, the Youth Empowerment Action Committee, and to the NEMO volunteers. And if you are willing to become a volunteer, you can sign up at NEMO through nemo.govt.lc, and you can find the application there or call them. You could look for the number on the website since I don't have it readily available. Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister, and thank you, Ministers. Thank you, Permanent Secretaries, Police, Fire, WASCO, everyone, and St. Lucia for joining us for this update on the passing of the Trough of November 6th. Thank you and have a good day.